Did you know that 97% of Americans are deficient in omega-3s? While omega-3s are often correlated with fish and fish oil, we here at Ascent Nutrition uniquely water extract our omega-3s from algae, the source of omega-3s. For a limited time, try Ascent Nutrition's algae oil DHA at goascentnutrition.com and use discount code SUMMER10 for 10% off. That's SUMMER10 for 10% off at goascentnutrition.com.
2 former Caltrain employees have been sentenced to jail time after building and living in secret apartments inside Caltrain stations on the peninsula.
You know, I know public transportation is not as widely used all across the United States of America as much as Europe or cities like New York City, but it seems to me it's a bit ridiculous that you have 2 different Caltrain managers that managed to get away with 4 years building secret apartments at train stations using embezzled funds from the taxpayer in order to do so. And again, nobody figured this out until multiple years later. Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Sean, and this video that we're going to talk about today can only be described as hilarious, can only be described as amusing, can only be described as so ridiculously California in every possible way that you know it could have occurred nowhere else but a blue city in that wonderfully stupid blue state. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
So look, I have to say something that isn't going to make sense to those of you who don't live in New York City, but those apartments are nice. Those apartments are definitely places where I would consider living. And if you think about all the factors that make an apartment good in the city of New York, short commuting time, like being on a rail or subway line, you have convenience and a central hub in the city. There's actually a lot of space when you compare it to a New York City apartment. This is actually a very nice living quarters. And again, I know many of you who live in different parts of the country are going to yell absurd, but the fact is, with rents in California the way that they are, with rents in New York City the way that they are, a subway station apartment, not the worst thing I've ever heard of, not the craziest pitch I've ever heard of. And honestly, if it was listed on a site and I was looking for a place, I would definitely consider it. Now, the train driving by and rattling the crap out of your apartment every 20, 30 minutes or an hour whenever it comes might be a bit of an issue for me personally, but the fact is, I know a lot of people who probably would take this over, but what I find more interesting is how these people were able to get away with this for so long, how they were able to elude those notoriously good auditors in the California government and get by with all this misappropriated funds building their own apartments. And of course, I say that sarcastically. California is the same state that recently revealed that they cannot account for $25 billion that they spent on homeless services over a 5-year period. So to me, it's not surprising that they have no idea where their money is going. This is the standard operating procedure in the state of California. But yeah, it's still kind of nice. I'm not going to say that I wouldn't live there. In fact, I'm calling my listing agent right now and thinking about moving in.
2 former Caltrain employees were sentenced to a collective 6 months in jail this week. Both men were charged back in 2024 with the felony theft of public funds after they embezzled money to build secret apartments. One in the Caltrain station in Burlingame and the other in the nearby Millbrae station.
The next thing that's absolutely shocking right here is that these 2 guys, first of all, built them in separate stations, so they didn't want to live together. Maybe one person concocted this scheme, managed to pull it off, and then another person decided to follow it up. But they're actually getting 6 months in jail for this. And you guys might be thinking that it's about the embezzlement. You guys might be thinking that it's about them stealing public property, not only public money in order to renovate that public property, but the fact is, the primary issue that I can see that separates them from all these other different various criminals who don't go to jail is the fact that they successfully built something in a relatively short period of time. And based on what we know from the state of California, that's actually the real crime right here, is that they didn't submit to 20 plus years of environmental reviews before breaking ground on this particular project. This is actually the consequences of violating the insane regulations and building housing in California, not not for actually stealing public funds, which oftentimes in that state gets you promoted or rewarded with more public funds.
This is why I say to people, never say you've seen it all, because something like this new will come up.
San Mateo County District Attorney Steve Wagstaff tells us the men lived inside the apartments for several years. In total, they spent over $40,000 building them and even had things like office spaces and living rooms inside.
So this guy brings us a life lesson about working at the local district attorney's office, which is never think that you've seen it all at any point in time at all whatsoever, because eventually the criminals will show you up in a way that you just weren't expecting. And by the way, we actually covered a story similar to this where a woman had built a secret home in the back of a sign at one of those big box stores, which by the way was also incredibly cool. I gotta be perfectly honest. I was a little bit in support of that woman just based on her ingenuity, just based on how much space she managed to carve out in the back of said sign and the fact that she did this while working a full-time job. But yeah, this is a perfect example of criminals just being very creative. And again, when you have a state like California where nobody is monitoring the public funds in the way that they should, where the people that are supposed to manage these funds have no ethics, this is the kind of thing that you wouldn't necessarily expect, but embezzlement definitely is.
When it's public money that is being stolen by a public employee, that's egregious. That takes it up a level.
Both men followed similar schemes in order to create the apartments. How it worked was they hired contractors to remodel former office space, but kept each invoice under $3,000 so that they could be approved.
Now again, I made the comparison between these two individuals and the woman who built the secret apartment in the back of a sign of a big box store, but this right here is where the comparisons end. And this right here, by the way, is why I'm focusing on the state of California more than these two specific criminals, because they hired contractors with taxpayer money, submitted invoices for said contractors under $3,000, which again, I guess avoid all scrutiny in the state of California, and that's how they were able to get away with it.
They hired contractors to remodel former office space, but kept each invoice under $3,000 so that they could be approved.
And while that sentence is just kind of uttered by the local news reporter right there, like, no big deal, nothing to worry about, don't you think it's a little bit weird that in the state of California, you could completely modify an office space using $40,000 worth of taxpayer funds, hire contractors to do so, have those contractors do very specific things that you would not normally expect in said office space, like build a full bathroom with a shower and or tub, a sink, stuff that obviously looks not like it's for the public, but looks like it's for somebody's private residence. And because you kept the invoices under $3,000 for any individual project, you just get away with it for years. I'm telling you guys, if we end up looking for updates into this particular story, maybe we find out what happened with the indictment or the trial, somewhere in there, what we're actually going to discover is that one of these guys cheated on their girlfriend or something of the sort, and she's the one who called in the tip. She's the one who revealed this, because I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that the state of California would have ever caught on to this scheme had it not been for that. Again, these people were moving in full bits of furniture into this location. They might have actually been getting their own personal mail and packages at this location. It's not like they have a pop-out bed. That's a real bed right there. And again, all of this office space that allegedly, theoretically, hypothetically should be in use at this particular train station just went missing without anybody detecting it for years. And I'm supposed to take this as a stunning sign of victory because the prosecutor got 6 months in this particular case, but I'm a bit suspicious of everything surrounding this, and I definitely 100% think that this was not discovered by investigators. Again, somebody who was told probably snitched, and that's why they're in this situation right here. And by the way, 6 months seems like nowhere near enough for a crime that should be a felony, which is the misappropriation of $40,000 in public funds. But again, I really genuinely think the real crime here is that they actually built a housing apartment. They actually had a place to live in the state of California. And we all know that unless you let the unions and the environmentalists extract their pound of flesh, extract every penny possible from these projects to the point where they cost millions of dollars, then you will face the full wrath of the political class of the state of California.
Caltrain was unavailable for an interview, but sent ABC 7 News a statement, which reads in part, The misuse of public funds for private use is a violation of the law, Caltrain policy, and the public's trust. In cases where there is evidence of unlawful conduct by an employee or a contractor, we immediately act to rectify the situation.
You know, normally when we get statements from organizations or individuals that are facing some kind of charges or lawsuit, the statement is just not any good. Obviously, they're not going to give you any information, and there's reasons for that. You know, ongoing litigation and whatnot, you know, things that make perfect sense. However, this statement, there's no excuse for it being this bad. There's no excuse for it being this piss poor. First off, they tell us that the misuse of public funds for private purposes is actually against our laws and Caltrain policy. And I will just point out that the way that these government institutions are run, definitely 100% it is not against their policy. It's standard operating procedure, might be against their written stated policy. And then they follow it up by saying that in these kind of cases, you know, where people build secret apartments that we don't discover 4 years, we always act to immediately rectify the situation. You know how we immediately rectified this situation years later by not doing anything about it because we didn't know about it, because we're absolute idiots in these particular jobs. We don't manage your money well. But after somebody called in a tip, after that angry ex-girlfriend was like, hey, there's some shenanigans going on, that's when we immediately acted. That's when we were right on top of it. That's when we got big mad and we said, hey, person, you're gonna have to go to jail for 6 months. I mean, you won't lose your pension or your benefits or anything of the sort, but 6 months in jail, that's what you're gonna get because you stole $40,000 a piece, and we can't have that. I mean, that's normally a felony. They call it grand larceny when you steal over $1,000, but for whatever reason, you guys were able to duck all of that and get 6 months in jail. And by the way, we know based on California policies that their jails are overcrowded because you can't send a bunch of people to prison unless they commit certain violent offenses. So what's ultimately going to end up happening, or I wouldn't be surprised if it happened, is that they won't serve anywhere near the full 6 months in jail. They'll get the slap on the wrist. They'll be told that they have to pay this money back. They'll get a payment plan, and we'll never hear about this again until we discover more and more apartments. Again, it's not like California's train system is New York's train system, New York City's, which is like the most amount of subway tunnel across the entire world because we've had 100 years to build it. Don't fact check me on that, nerds, by the way. If some other place has more tunnels, then I don't want to hear it. But yeah, they only have like 8 stations in the entire state because they don't do subway stuff, and it's suspicious that anybody's around them because everybody drives. So you would think that somebody would investigate, figure this out, notice the flat screen TVs and bedroom furniture that's being moved in, but apparently nobody was any the wiser. All the contractors, they just took the money because they were like, building a residential bathroom inside this subway station, no big deal. Nothing to worry about.
Outside the Burlingame Caltrain station Friday afternoon, many passengers were shocked to learn what had been going on.
Now I'm looking the building. I want to know what kind of furniture he has upstairs.
Now, again, I will say I agree with this lady. My first thought was, what kind of furniture does he have in there? And apparently legitimate furniture. And the next guy says, oh, well, I never would have thought of this, which again makes sense. It sounds completely stupid. Who would have thought of this?
Bill Cromer tells us he takes the train about once a week. He said he never had any indication someone was actually living there.
I'm surprised that nobody else noticed as well, so he obviously kept well under the radar for everyone.
But again, I reject the notion that they were keeping this so well under wraps while they hired different contractors to remodel these areas to turn them into apartments, because that is clearly and obviously just not true. It's just that California wasn't checking in on the taxpayer dollars that they're wasting.
Caltrain was told to keep the apartments as they are while the cases were making their way through court.
So I actually find that to be really cool that the apartments were preserved throughout the whole course of the trial because, you know, it's the evidence being utilized in this particular case. And honestly, genuinely, if these are habitable environments, I just say keep them. You already spent the money. Who needs more office space? Obviously not you guys because you didn't notice it was missing. So just keep the apartments there, rent them for a little bit of money, call them very commuter-friendly apartments, and just enjoy it. They ended up contributing to society inadvertently and exposing the ridiculous nature of the state of California. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about renegade apartments in the state of California. Till next time.